The snowstorm raged with unrelenting ferocity, blanketing the remote mountain road in a suffocating silence. Victor, a seasoned truck driver, tightened his grip on the wheel, his breath visible in the icy air inside the cab. The headlights of his truck barely pierced the swirling white chaos ahead. Just as he considered pulling over to wait out the storm, his eyes caught something unusual, a faint glow coming from an abandoned cabin tucked away on the roadside. Curiosity mixed with concern. Who could possibly survive in such conditions? Against his better judgment, Victor slowed his truck to a halt and trudged through the snow toward the cabin. The sight he encountered inside would haunt him forever. On the cold wooden floor lay a girl, or so he thought at first glance. She couldn't have been older than 10, her delicate frame trembling from the bitter cold. Her pale skin was almost translucent, her lips cracked and blue, but what truly shook Victor was her swollen belly, a clear sign that this fragile being was heavily pregnant. "Hey, are you okay?" Victor called out, his voice trembling as much from shock as from the cold. The girl stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open just enough to reveal the terror hidden within. She clutched her belly protectively, her lips moving but no words escaping. Victor didn't wait. Instincts kicking in, he scooped her up, noting how unnaturally light she felt in his arms. The icy winds howled louder as he rushed back to his truck, the storm almost as if it were trying to keep them there, frozen in time. "Hold on, kid," he muttered, adjusting the heat to full blast as he sped toward the nearest town. The drive was treacherous, the snow threatening to consume the truck at every turn. Victor couldn't shake the questions swirling in his mind. How did she end up here? What kind of monster could let a pregnant child fend for herself in a storm? The girl remained silent, clutching her belly, her breathing shallow. It wasn't until they reached the lights of a small rural clinic that Victor noticed something even more unsettling. Her eyes, though filled with pain, held a strange wisdom, far beyond what he'd expect from a child. The storm was still raging as Victor banged on the clinic door. Shouting for help, nurses rushed to open the door, their gasps audible when they saw the tiny figure in his arms. "She's pregnant," Victor said breathlessly, his words almost sticking in his throat. "Please, help her." The nurses sprang into action, but not without whispered questions and judgmental glances. How could this happen? One muttered under her breath. Victor, standing soaked and shivering in the waiting room, was left grappling with the same question. The girl's presence was a mystery, but one thing was certain. There was a story behind her frozen silence, and it was one that could shake the foundations of everything they believed. What happened to this young woman? Who is she? Really? And why was she left to face such an impossible fate? Stay tuned as we uncover the chilling truths behind her condition, her past, and the storm that brought her here. If you found this story gripping so far, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Inside the rural clinic, the storm outside was a distant roar compared to the quiet tension that had settled within. Lila lay on the hospital bed, her tiny frame almost disappearing under the thick layers of blankets. The room was dimly lit, the hum of medical equipment the only sound as nurses hurried around her. Victor sat in the waiting area, his hands trembling slightly from the cold, or perhaps from the surreal events that had unfolded. He couldn't shake the image of the girl from his mind. Pregnant, alone, left to freeze in the middle of nowhere. Who was she? And what had led her to such a desperate situation? A nurse stepped into the waiting room, her expression grave. "Sir, we need to ask you some questions," she said softly, motioning for Victor to follow her into a small side office. Victor nodded, still trying to process everything. "I found her in an abandoned cabin near the pass. She was unconscious, freezing. And, well, you've seen her condition." His voice trailed off, his mind still grappling with the implications. The nurse frowned. "We've examined her. Physically, she appears no older than 10, but," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Her condition is highly unusual. Her body shows signs of adulthood in ways we wouldn't expect for someone her size." Victor's confusion deepened. "What are you saying?" The nurse hesitated before answering. "We believe she's much older than she appears, possibly in her 20s. It's a rare condition, something affecting her growth and physical development. But we'll need more tests to confirm. Victor sat back in his chair, the weight of the revelation sinking in. The girl wasn't a child after all. But if that were true, then who was she? And why had she been left to fend for herself? Hours later, Lila woke up, her eyes fluttering open to the dim light of the room. A nurse sat beside her, offering a comforting smile. "You're safe now," she said gently. "Do you remember what happened?" Lila nodded weakly, her voice barely a whisper. "The storm, I was running. I needed to get away." Victor, standing by the door, stepped forward. "Running from what? Or who?" Her gaze shifted to Victor, cautious but not fearful. "A man. He's dangerous. He'll come looking for me," she said, her voice trembling. "I couldn't stay there anymore. Not with him." The nurse and Victor exchanged a glance. "Who is this man?" Victor asked, his voice steady but firm. Lila hesitated before answering. "His name is Charles. He was supposed to take care of me, but he didn't. He lied to everyone. And now?" Her hand instinctively moved to her swollen belly. "I have to protect my baby." As the storm raged on outside, Victor pressed for more answers. "Lila, how old are you? What's going on here?" She took a deep breath, her voice steadier now. "I'm 26. I was born in a small town, but I don't remember much of my childhood. I was different. My body never grew like it should have. People always treated me like a child, even when I wasn't." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "Charles found me when I was 20. He told me I was special, that he would protect me, but it was all a lie. He used me. He made me sign things I didn't understand. He said no one would believe me because of how I look. And when I found out I was pregnant, I knew I had to escape." Victor clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath the surface. "He's the one who left you in that cabin." "Isn't he?" Lila nodded. "He wanted to keep me hidden until..." Her voice broke, and she looked away. "Until the baby was born. He said it would seal the deal. I don't even know what that means." The medical team, now fully aware of the complexity of Lila's situation, worked tirelessly to stabilize her condition. But questions loomed large in the air. Who was Charles? And what kind of deal was he trying to make? Victor couldn't sit still. He paced the small waiting area, his mind racing. "This isn't just some abusive relationship," he muttered to himself. "There's something bigger going on here." The head nurse approached him cautiously. "We've contacted the authorities. If what she's saying is true, this man Charles might be involved in something far worse than we thought." Victor nodded grimly. "Good. She needs protection, and I want to help." The nurse hesitated. "Sir, this isn't your responsibility. You've done more than enough by bringing her here." Victor's expression hardened. "She's all alone. If I don't help, who will?" As the hours passed, the storm outside began to subside. But for Lila, the storm was far from over. She lay in the hospital bed, clutching her belly, her mind racing with fears of what might happen next. Victor entered her room, pulling a chair close to her bed. "Lila, I don't know what you've been through, but I promise I'll help you get through this. Whatever it takes." Her eyes filled with tears, a flicker of hope breaking through the fear. "Thank you," she whispered. Victor leaned back, his mind already formulating a plan. Whatever secrets Charles was hiding, they wouldn't stay buried for long. The clinic walls felt like a sanctuary from the storm outside. But for Lila, they were just another temporary refuge. Sitting up in her bed, her hands protectively cradling her belly, she hesitated before sharing the dark secrets of her past. Victor stood nearby, his concern deepening with every word. "I never really belonged anywhere," Lila began, her voice soft but steady. "I grew up in a small village, raised by distant relatives after my parents died. They didn't want me, but they took me in because they had to. Her condition, a rare disorder that stunted her physical growth, had made her the subject of cruel curiosity. I was the girl who never grew up," she said bitterly. "At school, I was teased endlessly. At home, I was a burden. Even as I got older, people still treated me like a child. By the time Lila was 20, her life had become a cycle of loneliness and silent endurance. The villagers whispered about curses, and her relatives treated her as a source of shame. That's when Charles came into her life. A wealthy, charismatic man in his late 30s, he arrived in the village claiming to be looking for business opportunities. But his real interest lay in Lila. He told me I was special, Lila said, her eyes clouding over with the memory. He said I deserved more than this village could ever give me. At first, I thought he was kind, even protective. He made me believe I could have a better life. Charles spent weeks earning the trust of Lila's family, presenting himself as a generous benefactor. Eventually, he offered to take her to the city, promising to fund her education and help her start fresh. For someone who had only known rejection and ridicule, it was an irresistible dream. But once Lila was under Charles's care, his demeanor shifted. He controlled everything, she said, her voice trembling. He told me what to wear, what to say, who I could talk to, and because I looked like a child, no one questioned him when he introduced me as his ward. Over time, Lila realized she wasn't just a victim of control, she was a pawn in something far more sinister. Charles used her youthful appearance to gain sympathy and trust from his business associates, convincing them to invest in his fraudulent schemes. He made me sign papers I didn't understand, she confessed. When I asked what they were, he said it was just to protect me. But later, I found out I'd signed away my rights to everything. My bank accounts, my decisions, even my freedom. Lila's voice grew quieter, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the room. He told me no one would believe me if I tried to leave. He said I'd always be seen as a helpless child, and that he was the only one who could protect me. Lila's world shifted again when she discovered she was pregnant. At first, she thought the baby might give her strength to escape, to reclaim some control over her life. But Charles had other ideas. He was furious at first, Lila said, her hand resting on her belly. But then he changed. He said the baby was a blessing, a way to secure our future. I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but I soon realized he intended to use my pregnancy to manipulate more people into trusting him. Charles became more possessive, keeping Lila isolated. She was no longer just a pawn, she was a prisoner. He wouldn't let me leave the house. He hired people to watch me, to make sure I didn't run. But I knew I couldn't let him have this baby. I had to get out, no matter what. One night, while Charles was hosting a party for his associates, Lila saw her chance. She had overheard a conversation about an upcoming trip and knew he would be distracted. Gathering what little courage she had, she slipped out through the back door, carrying only a small bag of essentials. I didn't know where I was going, she admitted. I just ran. I found a train station and bought a ticket to the farthest place I could afford. That's how I ended up in the mountains. For weeks, Lila moved from place to place, staying in shelters and abandoned buildings, but Charles's men were never far behind. I could feel them closing in, she said, her voice breaking. Every time I thought I was safe, they would find me. I started to think I'd never escape. Eventually, the harsh winter forced Lila to seek shelter in an abandoned cabin. Exhausted and terrified, she thought she might finally be safe. But the cold was relentless, and without proper food or warmth, her strength began to wane. I didn't think I'd make it through the night, she said, her eyes filling with tears. I thought maybe it would be better if I didn't. At least then, Charles wouldn't get the baby. But fate had other plans. Victor's arrival had been her last, desperate chance at survival. As Lila finished her story, Victor's fist clenched at his sides. That man, he said through gritted teeth, he's not just controlling, he's evil. And he's not going to get away with this. Lila looked at him, her expression a mixture of fear and hope. You don't understand. He has money, power. He'll come for me. He always does. Victor's eyes hardened. Let him try. This time, he's not getting what he wants. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. A nurse appeared, her face pale. Victor, she said urgently. There are men outside asking about Lila. They claim to be her family. But she hesitated, glancing at Lila. Something about them doesn't feel right. Lila's face turned white. It's him, she whispered. He's found me. Victor stood, his jaw set. Then it's time we stopped running. The tension in the clinic was palpable as the nurse's words hung in the air. There are men outside asking about Lila. Victor's heart sank as he glanced at Lila, who had gone pale. Her wide eyes, filled with panic, darted around the room as if searching for an escape. Victor moved quickly, positioning himself between Lila and the door. "Stay here," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside him. "I'll handle this." Lila grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You don't understand," she whispered urgently. "They're not here to talk. They'll do whatever it takes to take me back." Victor knelt to meet her eye level. "They won't get past me," he said. "I promise." Steeling himself, Victor stepped into the hallway, his boots echoing on the cold, sterile floor outside the clinic's main entrance. He could see 3 men in dark coats speaking to the receptionist. Their body language was sharp and aggressive, like predators closing in on their prey. "Excuse me," Victor said loudly, drawing their attention. "Can I help you with something?" The tallest of the men, his face partially obscured by a thick scarf, turned slowly. His cold eyes assessed Victor with a calculating gaze. "We're looking for a young girl," the man said smoothly. "Her family's very worried about her." Victor crossed his arms, blocking the hallway. "Family? Huh? Funny. She didn't mention anyone." The man's expression darkened. "We have paperwork proving our guardianship. This isn't your business." Victor didn't flinch. "You're right, it's not. It's the police's business. I'll call them now, and we can sort this out." At the mention of the police, the men exchanged glances, their carefully constructed facade cracking. Without another word, they turned and walked out into the snowy night. But Victor knew this wasn't over. Victor rushed back to Lila's room. "We need to leave," he said bluntly. Lila's panic deepened. "Leave? But where can we go?" "They'll find me anywhere." Victor crouched beside her. "I know the mountains better than they do." "There's an old cabin further up, deep in the woods. No one will find us there." Lila hesitated, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "But the baby." Victor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll make it work, but staying here isn't safe anymore." With little time to spare, they gathered what they could: blankets, medical supplies, and a small bag of food provided by the clinic staff. As they slipped out the back door, the cold night air hit them like a wall, the snow crunching loudly under their feet. The trek through the mountains was grueling. The snowstorm had left a thick layer of powder, making every step an effort. Lila struggled to keep up, her small frame and pregnant condition slowing her down. Victor turned back to check on her, his expression softening. "Come on," he said gently, offering his hand. "We're almost there." Lila took his hand, her grip weak but determined. "I don't know how much longer I can go," she admitted, her voice trembling. Victor glanced at the dark woods around them, his instincts honed by years of navigating these mountains. "We'll rest here for a bit," he said, guiding her to a large tree that provided some shelter from the wind. As they sat in the snow, Victor pulled out a thermos of warm tea he had packed. "Drink this," he said, handing it to Lila. She sipped the tea, her hands shaking. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. Victor hesitated, then shrugged. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because no one should have to face this alone." The brief respite didn't last long. A faint noise, a crunch of snow underfoot, snapped Victor to attention. He motioned for Lila to stay quiet, his eyes scanning the dark forest. Then he saw them, flashlights bobbing in the distance, their beams cutting through the trees like searching eyes. The men had tracked them. Victor's heart raced. "We need to move." "Now," he whispered. Lila nodded, her fear giving her a burst of energy. Together, they trudged through the snow, the sound of their pursuers growing closer. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the terrain became more treacherous. Victor used his knowledge of the area to lead them through narrow paths and over frozen streams, hoping to throw the men off their trail. But the men were relentless. At one point, a flashlight beam swept dangerously close to their hiding spot behind a cluster of rocks. Victor held his breath, his arm protectively wrapped around Lila. As the light passed by, after hours of cat and mouse, Victor spotted the cabin in the distance. It was barely visible through the snow-covered trees, but it was their only hope. "There," he said, pointing. "We'll be safe there." Lila nodded, her exhaustion evident but her determination unwavering. Together, they made a final push toward the cabin, their footsteps barely audible over the howling wind. Once inside, Victor secured the door with a heavy beam. The cabin was cold and dark, but it was shelter. He quickly started a fire in the old stone fireplace, the warmth spreading slowly through the room. Lila sank onto a dusty couch, her breaths coming in short gasps. "I thought they had us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor knelt beside her. "They're not giving up. But neither are we." Outside, the men regrouped. The leader, his face twisted with frustration, barked orders to the others. "Spread out." She couldn't have gone far. They began combing the area, their flashlights casting long shadows across the snow. One of the men found a piece of torn fabric caught on a branch, a clue that reignited their pursuit. Inside the cabin, Victor kept watch by the window, his eyes scanning the dark forest. He could see the faint glow of flashlights moving closer, their eerie light a reminder that the danger was far from over. He turned to Lila, who was resting with her eyes closed. "Stay here," he said softly. "I'll keep them away." Lila's eyes snapped open. "No, you can't go out there. They'll kill you." Victor smiled faintly. "I've faced worse. Trust me." The air inside the cabin was thick with tension, the only sound the crackling fire struggling to warm the freezing room. Victor stood by the window, peering out into the pitch-black forest. The faint glow of flashlights bobbed closer, a grim reminder that Charles's men were relentless. Lila sat on the couch, clutching her belly, her face pale but resolute. "They're getting closer," Victor said quietly, turning to her. "We can't wait any longer." Lila's voice trembled, but her resolve was clear. "What can we do? They'll break in any second." Victor moved quickly, grabbing an old hunting rifle mounted above the fireplace. It was dusty and looked like it hadn't been used in decades, but it was better than nothing. "We fight," he said firmly, loading a single round he found in a drawer. "I'll hold them off. You stay hidden." Lila shook her head. "No, this is my fight too." Victor stared at her, his heart torn. He admired her courage but couldn't shake the fear of what might happen. "You've already fought enough. Let me take it from here." The first sign of trouble came with a loud crash. A log hurled against the cabin door, shaking the entire structure. "Come out, Lila," a gruff voice called from outside. "You know you can't run forever." Victor motioned for Lila to hide behind the overturned table. "Stay down and stay quiet," he whispered, gripping the rifle tightly. The door burst open with a deafening bang, splinters flying across the room. 3 men stormed in, their faces obscured by scarves and hoods. The leader, the tall man Victor had confronted at the clinic, stepped forward, scanning the room. "You've caused us a lot of trouble, old man," the leader sneered, his cold eyes locking onto Victor. "Where's the girl?" Victor raised the rifle, his hand steady despite the chaos. "You're not taking her. Turn around and leave, or this ends badly for you," the leader chuckled darkly. "You've got one shot. You think you can stop all of us?" Victor didn't answer. Instead, he pulled the trigger, the deafening blast shattering the tension. The shot missed its mark but grazed the arm of one of the men, sending him stumbling back with a cry of pain. The other 2 lunged at Victor, one swinging a crowbar. Victor dodged, using the rifle as a club to knock the weapon from the attacker's hand. But he was outnumbered, and the fight quickly became a desperate struggle. As Victor fought valiantly, Lila's fear transformed into determination. She spotted a heavy iron poker near the fireplace. Crawling silently, she grabbed it, her hands gripping it tightly. When one of the men pinned Victor against the wall, Lila sprang into action. With a burst of strength, she swung the poker, striking the man's back. He cried out, collapsing to the floor. Victor used the distraction to throw the second man off him, sending him crashing into a table. The leader turned to Lila, his face twisted with rage. "You've got guts? I'll give you that," he said, advancing on her. But it's over. Lila, come with me now, and I might let the old man live. Lila stood her ground, the poker still in her hands. I'm not going anywhere with you, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. You've taken enough from me. The leader smirked, pulling a knife from his belt. Have it your way. Before the leader could reach her, Victor tackled him from behind, the two men crashing to the floor in a flurry of fists and kicks. Lila watched in horror as the knife glinted in the firelight, narrowly missing Victor's side. Summoning every ounce of courage, Lila grabbed a lantern from the table and hurled it at the leader. The glass shattered, and flames erupted, forcing him to roll away, swatting at his burning coat. The chaos gave Victor the opening he needed. He grabbed the fallen crowbar and struck the leader, knocking him unconscious. Breathing heavily, he turned to Lila. Are you okay? Lila nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm fine, but we need to get out of here before more of them come. Just as they thought the danger had passed, the sound of an engine roared outside. A sleek black SUV pulled up, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The doors opened, and out stepped Charles. He was dressed impeccably, his expression calm and composed despite the carnage around him. Well, Charles said, his voice smooth and mocking. You've made quite the mess, haven't you? Victor stepped forward, the crowbar still in his hand. It's over, Charles. You're not getting her back. Charles chuckled. Oh, Victor, you're brave. I'll give you that. But you don't know who you're dealing with. He gestured to the remaining men, who began to close in again. You're not taking my baby, Lila shouted, stepping out from behind Victor. Her voice, though trembling, was filled with defiance. Charles's smirk faltered for the first time. Lila, darling, this isn't about the baby. It's about us. You belong with me. Lila's eyes burned with anger. I don't belong to anyone, and you're not going to use my child as another pawn in your schemes. The standoff escalated as Charles's men moved toward Lila and Victor. But the sound of sirens in the distance brought everything to a halt. Charles's calm facade cracked as he realized the police were closing in. This isn't over, he hissed, backing toward his car. You'll regret this. Lila, you both will. Before Victor could stop him, Charles jumped into the SUV and sped off into the night, his men scattering into the woods. The police arrived moments later, their flashing lights illuminating the cabin. Victor and Lila, battered but alive, recounted the events to the officers. As the police secured the area, Lila sank into a chair, her hands shaking. Victor knelt beside her, his voice gentle. It's over. For now. Lila looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and exhaustion. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Victor smiled faintly. We're not done yet, but we'll face whatever comes next, together. The cold morning sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the snow-covered mountains. Inside the cabin, the fire had long since burned out, but the warmth of survival lingered. Lila sat near the window, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. Victor returned from speaking with the police, his expression a mix of exhaustion and relief. They've taken the men into custody, he said, sitting beside her. Charles is still on the run, but the authorities are confident they'll catch him. Lila nodded, her hands resting on her belly. It's not over yet, but I feel safer now, because of you. Victor shook his head. You're stronger than you realize. Lila, you've been through so much, and you're still standing. The police arranged for Lila and Victor to be taken to a nearby safe house, a cozy lodge run by a retired officer. There, Lila began to recover, both physically and emotionally. Victor stayed by her side, helping her navigate the path forward. Lila spent her days preparing for the arrival of her baby, each step a small act of defiance against the shadow Charles had cast over her life. The lodge's caretaker, Mrs. Harper, became a surrogate mother figure, offering wisdom and warmth. You've got a bright future ahead. Dear Mrs. Harper said one evening, handing Lila a cup of tea. That little one is going to need your strength, and from what I've seen, you've got plenty to give. Weeks later, The moment Lila had both feared and hoped for arrived. In the early hours of a snowy night, she went into labor. Victor, ever the protector, rushed her to a nearby hospital with Mrs. Harper accompanying them. The delivery was long and exhausting, but when the first cries of her baby echoed through the room, Lila felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. The nurse placed a tiny, wriggling baby boy in her arms, and for the first time in her life, Lila felt whole. "He's beautiful," Victor said softly. Standing by her side, Lila looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "No," Victor corrected, his voice filled with pride. "You did it." The days that followed were filled with quiet joy. Lila named her son Eli, a name symbolizing strength and resilience. She began to find her footing as a mother, each day bringing new challenges but also new triumphs. Victor, true to his word, remained by her side. While the threat of Charles lingered, Lila refused to live in fear. With the help of Mrs. Harper and the police, she began taking legal action against Charles, determined to expose his crimes and ensure he could never hurt anyone else. "You've come so far, Lila," Victor said one evening as they sat by the fire. "I know it hasn't been easy, but look at you now. You've got a future worth fighting for." Lila smiled, holding Eli close. "I couldn't have done it without you." Though their bond had grown deep, Victor knew it was time for Lila to take the reins of her life. "You're strong enough to stand on your own now," he told her one morning, his voice heavy with emotion. "I'll always be here if you need me, but it's time for you to live the life you've built." Lila hugged him tightly, her tears soaking into his coat. "Thank you, Victor, for everything. You'll always be a part of our family." As Victor walked away into the snowy morning, Lila felt a bittersweet ache in her chest. But she knew he was right. Her journey wasn't over. But for the first time, it was truly hers to lead, through courage, determination, and the kindness of strangers. Lila found her way out of the darkness and into a new life. Her story is one of survival, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. What do you think about Lila's incredible journey? How do you feel about Victor's role in her story? And what would you do if you were in Lila's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more inspiring tales like this one. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community. See you in the next chapter.